Rock Board of School Directors. This meeting is being recorded by the Council Rock School District and may be recorded by members of the audience. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Manning is going to lead us. Thomas? Where are you? Go ahead again.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're doing the national anthem. And please remain standing. We're going to do the national anthem.
One, two.
Durham, they were fantastic.
Thank you.
I heard the Philly Pops this weekend, and they were just about as good as that. Yeah, and better looking. Yeah. And I'm intrigued. I think it's absolutely wonderful to have this many kids in the ensemble, but I'm intrigued. I don't think I have ever seen an all-female percussion section before. Thank you very much, and happy holidays to you guys. Thank you, kids, for coming out.
Thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Do you want me to go ahead?
Real loud.
I'm going to start. Roll call. Mrs. Brooks? Here. Mr. Bialik? Here.
Mr. Bialik will not be attending tonight.
Dr. Foster?
I'm here.
Mr. Grupp?
Present.
Mrs. McKessie?
Here.
Mrs. Sexton?
Present.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. Block?
Here.
Mr. Abramson?
Here.
Mr. Klein, Superintendent's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Block. Let's start with a couple special presentations we have. Looking across there, do I see Mitchell here? All right, we may need to hold off on that. He's here. Where?
We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Mitchell, are you here? There he is. I want to introduce to everyone Mitchell Smedley. Mitchell is a sixth grader at Maureen M. Welsh, right, Mitchell? And he has this wonderful project that's about to start, and he's going to tell us about it. Good evening, Mrs. Smedley.
Hi, how are you?
Nice to see
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Our pleasure.
Here's
How's
the
Michael?
microphone. He's good. Michael's actually at his, he couldn't get enough of RMS, so he's back there for their
I
RMS
did hear
Idol
there's-
tonight.
Yes, there's a big event going
Seeing
on,
some
right?
old friends.
A sing-along or a
Yeah.
whatever.
You ready? Microphone, you got it? Yep. Can make sure you're talking.
Hello, I'm Mitchell Smedley. I'm a blind student in Council Rock, and you may know me because of my brother and sister being in this district as well. And my family has a kind of big fundraiser event called Bike the Basin. Along with other fundraisers, you also might have seen my name on some papers on your desk asking for expensive pieces of technology. But I'm not here tonight to ask you for any money or to do any fundraising. I'm here with some of my classmates to tell you about a huge project that's very important to my family. As I said, I'm a blind student here in Council Rock. I'm a sixth grader at Welch. I play Northampton baseball, swim for Spring Mill, take voice lessons, and wrestle here in the district. My blindness has never stopped me from being active in all parts of this community, except the Northampton Library. I read Braille, as you can see from my Braille machine here, but the Northampton Library does not have one book in Braille. That ends now. I'm not here to complain that I can't use the library. I'm here to tell you how my friends and I, along with others in the community, are going to change things for blind readers in Bucks County. My family, classmates, the Northampton Library, Council Rock, and the Bucks County IU are working together to get Braille books in the library. Some of my classmates and I already worked on making twin vision books. Those are Braille and print books in one, which we have a few samples of tonight. We would love for you to come see us in action on Martin Luther King Day, where we will catalog the books and load them on the shelves. And February 7th, that is the day of our grand opening for the Children's Braille Collection at the Northampton Library. There should be information in front of you for more details. I hope you are just as excited as I am about this project. Thank you so much for your time, and we will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Something tells me we're going to be hearing a lot from you far into the future. Very impressive.
Mitchell, thank you. We're not necessarily a Q&A session, but if there are questions, I will forward them to you. And if you'll get me more information about the February 7th grand opening, we'll get it out on our listserv in the near future, okay?
Okay.
Have you been nice to your sister recently?
I try.
Thank you very much for coming out, Mitchell. Very
Thank you for
impressive.
having
You did a great job. Tell your brother I said hi too, okay?
Okay.
Take care.
You too.
Thank you. Next up, I have two honored guests, Suzanne Loftus and Marianne Malicious, who have always been the spearhead of our Elementary Media Festival. And as a kickoff to the Media Festival, we typically award a logo to the members, to one lucky participant in the logo contest. So Suzanne, I'll let you start the process.
And do you have something for our...
I do.
Oh, thank you. When the time comes, thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to represent the Elementary Media Festival this evening. This year marks the 6th year of the Elementary Media Festival, and we thank you all for coming out and supporting us through the years. The board, the directors, principals, students, staff, and we are a grassroots organization of teachers, parents, staff members, students, and alumni. They come together every year to really encourage the use of technology in the elementary schools. So we're trying to have innovative projects and celebrate all technology across the board in all of our elementary schools. Last year we had over 100 different presentations that were awarded. Thank you very much. That were put together and brought on to the district level for judging. And we had a few hundred students that actually came to the event. We change some things up every year. As technology changes, so are we. So some of the things we did for the first time last year is, for those of you that were there, I know that there's people here that were there. We had the red carpet for the first time with the backdrop that you see for a lot of openings, which was a lot of fun. And this year we're changing our rubric to be able to allow some of the people who are voting on the different projects that have been submitted online. And we're also delving into the possibility of having a t-shirt design contest as well, or having a t-shirt created with our award winner this year as well. So we wanted to do a couple of different things this year additionally. And our award, our media festival this year is going to be on June 2nd, as it has been held in previous years at the Newtown Middle School. But one of the big exciting things for us to do every year, and many of you who are here may have voted on the winner this evening, is we have a promotional design contest every year. And this year's recipient submitted last year too, and this year she is our overall winner. And she's a 6th grader at Holland Elementary School, and her name is Farah Khatri. So Farah, please come join us. And I want her to share with you what her design looks like, so we blew it up a little for you. So why don't you walk around and show everyone what it looks like. And Mr. Klein has a certificate for you as well.
Congratulations, Farrah. Well done.
also printed out another copy for you and put it in a frame for you to keep as well. So all of Farah's design here will be on all the promotional materials leading up to this year's Media Festival on June 2nd. So congratulations, we're hoping you can be there at the Media Festival as well. Thank you very much.
Farrah, I'm assuming your creative inspiration is your sixth grade teacher, Mr. Murphy, right? Does he? Yeah, I figured that. Thanks for coming out, Mr. Murphy. Mr. Sanko, you too.
Thank you. And Mr. Klein, I asked Mr. Klein.
Mr. Klein?
I'm sorry.
I asked Mrs. Malicious if it was okay if we submitted some things anonymously, you know, our own movies too. So just know that there's a possibility that we're having some staff things put in this year's Media Festival as
I
well.
understand what you're driving at, Ms. Loftus. Be afraid, be very afraid.
Thank you.
Mr. Block, just a couple more announcements and then we'll move on for my report. For the members of the Council Rock community, we have our holiday school schedule posted and it's been out on listserv, but for your information, Tuesday, December 23rd is the last day of school for students K to 12. Council Rock schools will be closed from Wednesday the 24th to Sunday, January 4th, 2015. Schools will reopen for all students on Monday, January 5th, 2015. Offices will be open during parts of that holiday. Check in with your elementary, middle, or high school office if you plan on visiting, or Chancellor Center, just to make sure that we have holiday coverage during that time. I want to commend both Council Rock North and Council Rock South. Their concerts took place this week, and all I heard was outstanding commentary from people who were there to see the concerts. Congratulations to the directors of both of the two high schools for their hard work. Just so people understand and are ready, the last couple days for the Council Rock Education Foundation Teacher Appreciation Program will approach. If you're looking for a great way to recognize a teacher or staff member this holiday season, please consider honoring them with a contribution to the Council Rock Education Foundation. Their Teacher Staff Recognition Program allows you to designate a teacher or staff member who you wish to recognize over this holiday season. They receive a beautiful student design card, and you get the opportunity to see a gift donation that is deductible to the Council Rock Education Foundation that ultimately comes back to help the students in the school district. So if you are considering that, visit the website at www.CREdFoundation, hold on. I can find it.
Yes, that's it.
I should have been ready. CREducationfoundation.org. And that link again is on the listserv if people need it, and it's the link to Council Rock Education Foundation is also on the front page of the Council Rock website. And finally, as a matter of interest and hopefully participation for members of our public, we announced Council Rock Education Week, which is a week to celebrate education in the classrooms across the school district. We will use the week of January 20th through 23, January 20th to 23rd, 2015 as Council Rock Education Week. There will be a combination of classroom visitations and school workshops over that period of time. Individual schools will announce their schedule via website and listserv. So look for that information coming either as we close out this 2014 year or early in 2015. On behalf of everyone from the Council Rock School District, we wish you a very happy holiday and a safe and healthy new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. We'll move to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We would ask that you limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Please consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching this broadcast live on CRTV when speaking. It is our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that the members of our community have an equal opportunity to address the board without interruption. While the board welcomes your ideas and will consider them in deliberating an issue, we may not respond to your comments or questions. First up, we have Mr. Richey.
Good evening, John Roche, Wrightstown Township. First of all, happy holidays. Before I start with a general comment, I wanted to make one specific comment to appreciate the thoroughness with which the minutes are being prepared. I was reviewing the minutes of November 20th, and in the past, I know when I have been here making public comments very often, there's just been a very general thing saying this, John Roche spoke about this particular subject without any flavor of what's being covered. And I found the coverage of my comments, both before and after the meeting, or early and late public comment on November 20th, to be very complete, to give an accurate reflection, and I do appreciate that. So I wanted to express that. I saw on tonight's agenda that you are going to consider reforming the policy committee. I do encourage you to do that. I do think it is wise to have a regular committee at which there are inevitably going to be some meetings at which the public can come out and express their needs and their opinions regarding policy. So I do hope you agree to do that. I presume that that's the reason it's on the agenda. And I would like to ask, as I mentioned at the last meeting, at the last public comment I gave, with regards to policy 620, if that could be put on the agenda of any such committee, so that before we get too far into the budget process for this year, that the workings of that policy be looked at again. As I mentioned last time, the policy until this past year had been that the target fund balance, the unreserved fund balance, was to be 4% of the budget, and that the policy also said if it ever goes over 5%, then the administration can make a recommendation to the board, and the board can approve taking anything above 5% and putting it into capital projects. Last year, the policy was amended to make the target 5%, and yet the amount above which that money could be moved out was also 5%. So the workings of the policy used to be that just using a $200 million budget, I know we're above that, but just for ease of math, in the old days, the fund balance would have been $8 million or so, and that if it went over $10 million, that's when things would get moved out. What you've done with that policy change is now the administration is supposed to aim for a budget that gets a fund balance of precisely 10 million, and that if it ends up anything above 10 million, it gets moved out. There's no leeway there, and there ought to be leeway so that taxpayers are not put in a position of almost automatically having money being taken out of an undesignated fund balance, unreserved, and being moved into capital projects. So I encourage you to take a look and restore it to the way it used to be, if that is at all possible. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I have no one else on my list, but I can see a few more, so if you'd like to step to the mic and state your name and town, please.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Igval. I'm from Newtown. And first I want to say don't be afraid of the 2 pages. I cut out about 80% of the email I sent you guys last Friday. But I just wanted to, I know that the capital planning is not on the agenda for this evening, but I wanted to take the opportunity to make some points about that. And again, thank you all for the countless hours that you've put into the process over the last probably 1 to 2 years. I know you're tackling many challenging, complicated issues. And I also wanted to comment, I was surprised when I walked in here to see such a small turnout from the Wrightstown community. And in fact, the absence of the Wrightstown community is a direct reflection of the Wrightstown school community, because there's a school play going on tonight. And I would say 95% of the kids are actually in the play because it's so tight-knit. Both of my kids opted out because they're boys and they decided Cinderella was not for them. But so I'm here, and and Amy McIntyre is actually homesick, so she sends her regrets. But what I did want to say about the capital planning process with respect to the impact that it will likely have on Wrightstown, I'm not going to harp on the directive that was passed by the board in November to remove the modulars, which myself and the majority of the Wrightstown community have vocally opposed and articulated our rationale behind that without having, our reasons being primarily based on not having a longer-term plan. But given that that has been a directive, and I know that we continue to move forward, and based on that directive, Mr. Klein is looking at the impact that it has on Wrightstown. I want to say sincerely that I know Mr. Klein is he's looking to do what's absolutely in the best interest of the students. I don't think anybody is questioning that. But overall, I think there's a large consensus among the Wrightstown families and community that the implications of the removal of the modulars, which is that the 5th and 6th graders would be moved over to Newtown, is frankly, we feel strongly that it's not in the best interest of the students or the community, and here's why. We feel it's a temporary solution that causes as many or more problems than it solves. We think it makes more sense to sustain the status quo, and even if that means being, more overcrowded in the short term, if that gives us the time and buys us even a year to invest our time and energy in a longer-term solution, such as 5th and 6th grade centers district-wide or a full redistricting that more fully addresses the overall objectives of the capital planning with respect to creating efficiencies, we think that's a year worth waiting. We also feel it's in direct contradiction to Mr. Klein's vision for the elementary schools, which is posted on the website. And that was developed only a few months ago, and it emphasizes the importance of community and longevity. Limiting Wrightstown to a K-4 school just flies in the face of that. We see a lack of attention given to transportation, and I know my time is up, so I'll be brief on this, but I think what's being also overlooked is even just that transportation piece and the logistical nightmare that this is going to cause for families who have kids split between schools. That's going to have an impact on the students, because students are affected by their family's level of stress. And I know for myself, we're 2 full-time working parents. The idea of having to deal with 2 pickups, even if the bell times is staggered, all of that stuff is frankly overwhelming, and a lot more overwhelming and seemingly negative impact on the kids compared to figuring out a way to make the K-6 model work, even if it means a little bit, of getting close together with each other. The last thing I'll say is that if we conclude, if Mr. Klein's recommendation continues to be that some portion of Wrightstown has to move, I would ask that you reconsider which sections go. Again, in our family, in our case, we have a child who's going to be going into kindergarten. We also have one child going into 4th and one child going into 6th. So no matter how we divide this up, this is going to affect us. But I think the option of moving K-1 versus 5th through 6th, again, if the split has to happen, is worth solid consideration, because I think that transition at those lower grade levels is actually easier, and I think it will better retain the culture and the overall spirit of the Wrightstown school if the older schools stay together, because that's where most of the activities happen. That's where the PTO engagement comes in, and so it'll be less detrimental to the school. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Hi, Jason Funk, Wrightstown Township. Again, I want to thank everyone, wish everyone happy holidays. I'm going to speak again to kind of the issues of Wrightstown, and I wanted to thank Mr. Klein as well. He's been out to the school twice now, and has done a really good job, I think, with the community. So we appreciate that. I wanted to just touch on a couple sentences from the vision statement. It talks about community. It specifically states the success of our elementary schools is specifically connected to the sense of community that each school occupies within its attendance boundaries. And then skipping down, this, quote, community aspect is an important part of the district's emphasis, every school in Council Rock. This aspect of our elementary schools is best developed through a longevity within the school, that is, a K-6 structure builds better connection than a K-5 or K-4 model because of longevity in the elementary school experience. Again, I emphasized what the district emphasized, which was every school. So we're now talking about, as a quick fix, taking one of your schools and making it a K-4. And I think we've shown already, or we've tried to show as a community, that we can fit, and it has happened before, as far as I think Amy has done showed some modeling that, in fact, before we have had the same number of students per square footage, and it's worked before. In fact, the one year that the numbers would have been the same, we were, in fact, a blue ribbon school. So I just want to make sure that when you guys have this discussion and Mark comes with his suggestion to the board, that you guys take into account exactly what it is that you're doing here. The disparity here and not following your vision statement for one of your schools in the district, you're really doing a disservice to your constituents. And then on top of that, and I mentioned this before, and I know some other folks had heard this, I wanted to point out, again, and I know the board may have had some poor information previously, but this was a quote from Ms. Brooks on October 23rd board meeting. The issue for Wes is that, some said, put an addition on it. If that school could be renovated to a school that was actually an efficient size, that would be worthy of talking about. But that school can never be any bigger than what it is now. Understanding that, in fact, that is not the case, and understanding that it was someone specifically from this board who stated that talking about it, that would be something worthy of talking about. Why is the board not talking about it? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. Last night, to fulfill my New Year's resolution, keep talking about trailers till you take them all off. I think you're about ready to do that, and I couldn't be more happy. They've been on, a lot of them, including at Wrightstown, since 1986. That's a long time for a temporary structure. The kids are safer inside the buildings in a secure front entrance building. They're better off health-wise. Keeps them away from the little critters underneath the trailers. It keeps them away from when the swipe doesn't exactly work and they can't get back in. Trailers, we're finally at a point where our enrollment is down and trailers can come off. So I'll be not doing a cartwheel, but I may do a little jump when you vote to take those trailers off. As far as having two different schools, I just looked at my 1993-94 Goodnow handbook. Why I still have it, I do not know. But I told Mr. Murphy out in the hallway, he was teaching second grade here in this building in that year, and there were 8 sections of second graders. And every other grade had 6 sections or more. We needed the trailers. We don't need them anymore. I was on a committee, and you have to go back and see what Goodnow did for busing, because that was not a stress at all, to have 2 different schools where some of the families went to one and one went to the other. We did it for probably since Goodnow opened, for years and years and years. And we did have a different start time, like half the district went one time, one the other. So if you can find somebody that's been around that long, I'm sure it's Chuck, you'll find out how to work that out. And I was on a committee that recommended that Wrightstown close. And when we did that, we counted every single full-size classroom, included, then subtracted every single full-time section, and we believed it fit. We looked at 90%, it fixed. We looked at when they were the largest, it fit. The only criteria it did not fit was the 90% of the Schrader report. If you put all the students in Wrightstown, you got to be using closets and I don't know what else, because the Schrader report only says like 200 and some can fit when you take the trailers off. So although some parents, I understand, they don't want to separate, they don't want to have 2 schools. I've been here. I didn't want Chancellor to close. No way, no how. And it's hard, and I understand it's hard. But that wasn't my choice back then, and that shouldn't be the community's choice. You should do what's best for everybody in the district. That should be the administration's choice, and to see the overall picture. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to our consent.
Can I ask the personnel to move that?
Yeah,
We have
sure.
a number of people in the audience that are here for the first personnel agenda. With the board's permission, we'll move that up first for the personnel agenda and get a chance to highlight one of the recommendations there and then go back to consent, if that's okay?
Yeah, it's fine. Mrs. Sexton, would you read, that would be item number 1 under items for board approval?
On there, just a second. I move to approve the consent agenda, items A through I.
I'm sorry,
You wanna do
a second.
one?
We're gonna skip down just below that to move the
I'm
personnel
sorry,
action.
I'm sorry. I move to approve the personnel actions and EDRPP as contained in the attachment to this agenda. Second.
As part of the personnel agenda tonight, and before we start comment, we have the privilege and pleasure to be recommending to the board the candidacy of Mr. Tim Ketty for the assistant principal's job at Newtown Middle School. Tim, as many of you know, was a former dean of students and a teacher at Council Rock High School South, also a coach. He has been serving in Centennial for the last year and year plus, we'll say. And we are pleased to be bringing him back. Tim was vetted through a very exhaustive process with a number of candidates who came through and was the ultimate recommended candidate forward to the Board of School Directors. It is truly my pleasure to recommend Tim Ketty to you. Mr. Desko, do you want to just speak a little bit to the committee process and the members of the committee that are here this evening?
Sure. We had 40 applicants from around the region for this position, and we were just very excited about the process that was very rigorous. Started with a paper screening. We were able to bring 14 candidates in for a personal interview. From there, we were able to narrow down that candidate pool for a second interview to 5 of those candidates, and then recommended 2 candidates to Mr. Klein for central office interviews, and as Mr. Klein suggested, recommending Mr. Ketty for this position. We were sorry to see Tim leave when he left Council Rock. We're excited that he's coming back, and we know that he'll just add great value to Newtown Middle School as well as Council Rock School District. Tim did a number of things in this school district while he was here. District level, he was a leader in our use of restorative practices, our QPR program. He did a lot of trainings throughout the district schools, so he had a lot of hats that he wore besides what he did at Council Rock South. So again, we're just thrilled to be able to recommend him to you. And then maybe following the vote, we can ask Mr. Long to introduce the interview team who was gracious enough to come join us and be a part of the process.
I think it's a great reflection on Tim and on the process that many members of the interview team came forward. So thank you all for coming out and spending your time with us on Thursday evening. And I hope you'll stay. There's some exciting things about to follow on the agenda. So thank you. Any questions from the board? We're happy to entertain.
What's the effective date of the appointment?
We've been working, so let me preface it by saying, when we forayed into Centennial and asked about Tim, we did not find a single person who had anything but exceptional things to say. That being said, Tim's responsibility right now is the athletic director at the high school, and they're going to have some trouble replacing someone that has that kind of knowledge and expertise in that role. So we expect anywhere between 30 and 60 days for that transition, and in that interim, we'll have a plan for you to talk about in January.
So, that date is January?
I would say the middle of February would be the latest we would see. I've spoken to their superintendent. She has been nothing but gracious in terms of working with us, but I would think that it's going to be end of January, beginning of February before we can expect Mr. Ketty to be here full-time.
Because we're approving the personnel actions just for the sake of completeness, should we amend what we have on board docs for the effective date to say by an end date for the appointment?
I think the effective date there is to be determined, so we don't have a date there at all.
If you set a date, then it would expire. And if they didn't do it by that date, it wouldn't be valid anymore.
That's all right to keep it as TBD?
From a legal perspective, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other item that's on this is the EDRPP. And I sent the administration a pivot table with the information which I'm going to speak to you about now. One of the challenges we have in EDRPP is I went through, and disregarding the EDRPP at the middle schools and elsewhere, I looked at the EDRPP at the 2 high schools by responsibility, by what the task is. And I saw that the numbers were not equal. And it was reported back to me that when I tallied them, that there was some complexity in there, that they weren't right. But I haven't received new numbers, so I wouldn't vote to approve that. On a larger sense, I wanted to have a discussion which talks about, we're looking at schools now, and we're saying the schools are not as populated as they once were, and maybe we should close some schools. In part and parcel of that conversation, we've also talked about the student population at South is now going to be appreciably larger than the population at North. And yet, both buildings receive the same EDRPP allotment in terms of how much money is available. And the challenge there is that if you did it, if you took the South size and you said, well, there are only 84% as many students at North, you would reduce the EDRPP at North by 16%. I don't remember the number. I'm working from different spreadsheets here on an iPad. I think it was about $87,000. $84,000. So that's my question, and I want to put it forward to think as a board, because the challenge in response to that is, and if I mischaracterize it, I'm sure someone will correct me, but you would offer some of those functions that you offer, such as SEB or some of the other functions that you offer, you would offer fewer of them. You have to offer, in quotes, offer some of those options, SEB, the football team, certain other teams. And if you reduce the amount of EDRPP, you would reduce the amount of opportunity of the children at North. My response to that is, if you take it to a logical extreme, at some point when a school gets below a certain size, you can't offer all of the options that you did at a larger school. And so it becomes uneven, because for a child at a school which has less population, they have more opportunity to be in an event, in a leadership or on a first team or first squad position on some of these EDRPP positions, these co-curricular activities. But at the larger school, they don't. I pointed out to the board from this perspective, to apologize for a little bit of rambling. We need to start looking at EDRPP as well, which means if the classes are getting smaller, if the schools are getting smaller at the high school disparity, we need to restrict the EDRPP. If it means that they don't have pick a team or pick a activity because they don't have the EDRPP to support it, well, that's the unfortunate thing, is when a school gets smaller, some of those go away. I just think we need to look at it much more carefully than just saying we always did it before. To look back, in 2002, we opened South. And what happened was, without the numbers in front of me, conceptually, we doubled the EDRPP expense at the high schools, because now we had 2 football teams, and we had 2 SEBs, and we had 2 dramatic clubs, and we had 2 everything. But we did that. Times were different. So I want to put it forward. We're not, we need to look at, from a budgetary perspective, EDRPP and see how we want to address it. Do we want to continue to say, no matter how big that school will be, North will have fewer than South, we'll continue to staff it with a full EDRPP complement? Or do we want to take a rational approach and say, we have to tie population to the EDRPP perspective? Now, Mr. Klein, I know you and I differ on that.
Yes, I just want to make sure the board understands that we've had a continuing dialogue between myself, Mr. Desko, and Mr. Grupp, and we couldn't be further apart in that sense. Our specific purpose, and as part of our strategic plan, is to keep our offerings of extracurricular activities to be as broad and as helpful and to be as broad as possible to allow for kids to have that after-school activity. We know it is one of the great deterrents for any kind of dangerous decision that happens afterwards. If you want $84,000 cut, we can look in other directions, but EDRPP is one of the things that we are carefully protecting as we move forward. And we have touched that. I mean, back in 2008, 2010, we took a large chunk out of that in a lot of different ways. So I respect the analysis that Mr. Grupp has done. I think we tried to get the information back to you. If we were missing something, that's our oversight, but I thought we had everything back to you. But bottom line is that I don't think that we should be disparate in our high schools. I think that every high school should have an equalized opportunity for kids to have these programs.
And my response to that, because I welcome the dialogue, is doing it this way, we don't. Doing it the way we're doing it, we don't. Because the schools are different sizes. So if you want to say that we should have an equal opportunity for children in those activities, then as a board, we need to move to equalize the size of the schools.
So, can I comment? So I disagree, and I don't think it's irrational, although I think that it was posed that the rational thing to do is, so I'll take exception with that, but the difference in the schools is, to me, it's not a school with 1,000 and a school with 200. There's 1,700 kids at North. If we could cut, do we need as many assistants because there aren't as many kids in the band, or there aren't as many kids in the football team, or something like that? I'd be happy to look at that. But what I don't do, I don't believe the enrollment's down close enough to be we can't have a debate team because 8 kids wanted and our cutoff is 9. I think both high schools should offer the same extracurricular activities. I don't mind trimming them some by number of adults in some way, but I do mind not offering something if we have kids who are eligible for it. And I completely agree with Mr. Klein in that the kids who are involved in the extracurricular activities, by and far, everything I've ever read, do much better.
And I don't disagree. But it's different of 16%, and yet we keep funding it. And by the way, just so we're all clear, that 16% difference is established by population, and then applying the population difference to the amount of the budget, so establishing a purpose.
So I'll just say, if it's about saving money, and I'll say what I've said before, and in my heart that I mean it, we should not be paying for any sport that is not part of lifelong activity and learning. We should be spending our money on things that enhance self-help and intellect. And so sports that don't, like football, that are so expensive and carry such risk, should be paid for in the community by parents who wish to have their children participate in those sports. But as a taxpayer, I really hate that I pay for a sport where we put medical staff on the field to evaluate children for concussions ahead of time, because we know that's what can happen to them while they do that. And so I would love to spend more EDRP money on the debate team. I'd love to spend more EDRP money on track, on swimming, on things that will give us lifelong health. We've already been told by the medical staff at the University of Boston and in the news all the time, and now you've seen what the NFL has had to pay out. I resent that we put our children in that position and that we as taxpayers pay for it. As far as I am concerned, if I were going to save money in the EDRP plan, we'd have twice as much music, twice as much art. But sports like that, I'm willing to let people rent our field as they do now. The soccer kids come and rent the field. I recognize that I can walk down the steps, fall off the edge, and get a concussion. It's not just football that you get a concussion in, but we're paying for it. And high schools are going to get the same reaction the colleges are going to get soon. They're going to get sued. They're going to get sued because they did not act responsibly. We know that this is dangerous, and we should get out of the business. Happy to say it. Happy you gave me a chance one more time.
Is there any other comments on this overall motion?
The other item in the consent, or not, yeah, we're not.
No,
I'm
I'm
confused for a second.
eager to get Mr. Ketty up here.
Poor Mr. Getty.
So,
The athletic director, no less.
Yes.
There's something,
if there's no further discussion on this particular motion on the floor, I'd love to get a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Grupp,
For the reasons stated, no.
Mrs. McKessie,
yes.
Mrs. Sexton,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Block,
Yes.
Mr. Abramson,
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks,
Yes.
Dr. Foster.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Ketty, you're back with us.
And you had a couple introductions you wanted to make?
Well, let's
Or
start with
Mr.
Mr. Long,
Yeah.
if he would stand up and give an introduction to the members of his team that are here.
Tim, why don't you use
Come
the
to the mic.
microphone? Yeah.
Yes, please
Or at
do.
least into the light.
Makeup, please.
Well, thank you for this opportunity, and happy holidays to everybody here. As happy and proud as we are to bring Tim back, outstanding candidate. I'm excited to be working with him. I appreciate the opportunity to even share with you the great staff we have and the amount of commitment that we have at Newtown Middle School. And I'm just going to, we had a really nice cross-section of individuals that participated in the interview process through or from the secretary who's going to be working directly with Tim to the CARES coordinator, curriculum leaders, team leaders, math, our computer program, special ed. I mean, we had a nice cross-section. So without further ado, teacher assistants as well. Carol Willis, please. Thank you for your time and energy with this. Lori Zyla, Marcy Doheny, Pat Bound, Joe McNulty, and Paul Jardy. Thank you very much for your help and everything. And all keeps him to Newtown Middle School now. We'll figure that out. So, but Tim, congratulations. Happy to have you.
I would just like to thank the Board of Directors, Mr. Klein, Mr. Desko, the entire cabinet, and also the selection committee for this opportunity. I'm truly excited to come back to my family at Council Rock, and I look forward to working with Mr. Long, the faculty and staff, most importantly the students and the parents of Newtown Middle School community, and continuing the traditions of excellence as we move forward. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Congratulations.
You're sitting with two people that I don't know, but I can probably glean who they are. Would you introduce them to us, please?
I would absolutely love to. This is my father, Robert Ketty, and my mother, Peggy Ketty, who are kind enough to come out. I guess when you're 40 years old and you get a big job, mommy and daddy And unfortunately, my wife and children couldn't make it because my youngest is at her holiday. She's playing the violin at her elementary school. So I did ask my oldest daughter. I said, come on, you want to come? And she goes, no, I think it's more important to support Sophia, Daddy. You're a big boy. You can handle it yourself. So I thought that was very appropriate. But thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Meet Doug. You'll be living with him a lot.
So I've heard, Mr. Grupp. How's the family? Good? Well, tell everybody I say hello. Thank you.
And just one final comment as this process goes, I would be remiss if I did not also mention how much we're going to miss Terry Sturtz, who is the current assistant principal, who is retiring as of the end of this month. Terry was a fantastic addition to the administrative team at Newtown, but prior to that was a teacher that served in our middle level for a long period of time teaching Spanish. So I know Terry isn't here. I hope maybe she's watching, and if not, she can watch it on replay, or we'll send her the minutes. But Terry, thank you for your time and service. You will be missed. Tim, good luck. We look forward to seeing you sometime soon, I hope.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So we'll move back to the consent agenda, Ms. McKessie.
May I make one comment about the consent agenda before Mrs. McKessie reads that motion?
Sure.
There's a resolution on there with respect to real estate, which the district has a proportionate interest in. And it's a resolution prepared by the IU, which is the occupier of that real estate and has been marketing for some time. That resolution has gone out to all of the constituent school districts for approval. And I think that it's likely to go through some revision. I know that on behalf of Council Rock, I would like to see the provision with respect to basically an open obligation to reimburse the IU for demolition work to be revised or removed. So can I just suggest that that one document come off the consent agenda unless the administration says there's a real need to approve
No,
it
we're
tonight?
following a direction from the Bucks County Committee. You know, would you consider having consent agenda subject to solicitor review?
Well, can we
Would that
just
be
pull the
easier?
one item, then make that one item subject to solicitor review?
I'm happy with either option, and I'll come back to the board with a revision next month.
Mr. And I'm still getting an answer to that from Mr. Abramson. Has a question
I
about
talked
that.
to
Talking about
Abramson.
that. Okay.
So you want it pulled?
Hold or subject to solicitor review, whichever the board prefers. I'm fine with either.
Let's pull it because I don't think there's any immediacy, and I can
We can
explain to
cycle
Dr.
right
Glasso
through.
tomorrow that we're just going to take a couple extra.
Whatever.
What
Will
is
that
the
be-
item on pull?
It's
C?
C,
C.
Ms. McKessie.
This thing's
We've
been
been
sitting.
trying to get somebody to buy this
Yeah,
for a
I
long
understand.
time.
So if it waits a week or
No,
two,
but
it's not
right,
going to
if
be a
it has to,
problem.
maybe a buyer will come through, you never know. I'm hopeful.
Good. Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Mrs. Sexton. Thank you, Mr. Cox. We'll pull that.
I move to approve the consent agenda, items A through B, as well as D through I, as contained in the attachments to this agenda, subject to audit.
Second.
Discussion?
I'm not going to be voting to approve the expulsion waivers. The waivers that are contained in the packet this evening contain a phrase which is in excess of what the board's authority is. It has to do that a child who is excluded could not return to school following the completion of their excluded period unless they do something and attend twilight school. And that is beyond the authority of the board to put, because if we excluded the child for 45 days, they could attend school elsewhere, and it's not our obligation, it's not within our rights to say to them, they have to attend our program to get back to our school. And so for that reason, Mr. Klein has said that he is in the process of reworking the agreements. It's my cell phone. Reworking the agreements, but because they're not present, I'm not going to be able to work with them tonight. Everything I have rings. So I'll be voting no on the expulsion waivers.
You have a can of Coke you want to open?
Do you wish me to speak to
Yes,
that?
could you speak to that so the rest of us can feel comfortable voting?
My view is that these documents are fine for the board to vote on because these are agreements between the school district and the parents, essentially. So Mr. Grupp has raised, I think, a legitimate concern from his perspective, from a policy perspective, but I don't share his concern from a legal perspective, and I think the board can go ahead and vote on these.
Well, we're obligating the district, meaning that in these cases, if the child doesn't attend those programs, we are within our rights by this policy then not to permit them back into school after serving a full excluded period?
What I'm saying is that I think the board can enforce the provisions of these
But that's what
agreements
the provision is, so I'm asking.
because the parents are knowingly entering into these agreements, and they're getting something in exchange for these agreements that they believe is of value. They're getting a way back in to the school district. In theory,
Then we're
school
defrauding-
hold on.
then
A
we're
school
defrauding the
district,
parents.
a school district could permanently expel
Not if they say,
a student.
not if the age of these
Yes,
students.
yes, it can. It could permanently expel these students, subject to its right to find a way to educate them if they're unable to receive an education on their own. But the district can permanently expel these students. So my point is that the district, in my view, can do what it's trying to do here from a legal perspective.
Help me to understand. So a child under 17 years old who is being expelled by the board policy for 45 days could arbitrarily be expelled by the district as a permanent expulsion under 17 years old.
Yes. Now, that doesn't abrogate the district's obligation to find a way to educate that student if they're unable to provide for that education on their own by some other means. The district still has to find a way to educate that student. But that student is nonetheless permanently expelled from the Council Rock School District. Assuming there's a board hearing and all of the due process is provided to which the student and his or her family are entitled under the statute and the school code.
With all due deference, I believe then, given the preface of your comment, that we are defrauding the parents, because what we have told them then is they're getting something for value, and the answer is, with a 45-day expulsion, their child could stand on their head and spit nickels and still be obligated to come back to the district. And instead, they've agreed to what would have been the expulsion anyhow, because that's as by board policy, unless we're extenuating circumstances. So I believe that what we've listed here is inappropriate, and for that reason I'll be voting no on those expulsions.
Are there any other board comments?
I don't know if we should be discussing this in executive session.
Well, we can. Let's certainly not discuss any particular student or identify any particular student in this setting.
What we have on board docs, is that the final agreements, the
Yes.
waivers of the final agreements that we're voting on?
But in fairness to Mr. Grupp, we've struck that from all future agreements from this point forward. We will strike that because I don't disagree with what Jerry's saying. On a principal level, that's what we want for kids. We want kids to come to our Twilight program because that's where we're prepared to best educate them over that period of time. I don't disagree with Mr. Grupp if they choose not to come. They choose not to come, but then the parents obligate to do something with them over that period of time. But we will see to what that issue is, which is on the face of the agreement, we'll remove that. We'll still be saying to parents, your kid should come to Twilight, or you have to show us a way that no parent enters into these agreements without a sense that they want Twilight to be the place for their kid and are happy that we have that kind of program for them. So I hope that answers.
Is it within the administration's domain if the board authorizes it to strike that requirement that they come to Twilight as a key to admission on this? Strike it, initial it, have the parents initial it, and we're done?
I know what you're going to say to this, but it's been a part of our agreement for the past 8 years. I know that doesn't make it right.
So is probation. We finally got that off.
Understood, but again, until we actually address those issues from piece to piece, we haven't been able to alter those agreements. Mr. Desko and I have given a standard form agreement back to the administrators. We keep changing the forms, but now we won't be having that in there. We will continue to say to the parents, however, this is where we would like your child here.
I don't disagree with that, but you'll go 7-1, so go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Abramson, any more comment?
No.
Ms. Thomas?
No.
Have a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. McKessie?
Yes.
Mrs. Sexton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Ms. Abramson?
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
Dr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Grupp?
With the
With the
like
exception.
I thought you were going to say Mr. Grumpy.
with the exception of B.
That was
I
worth the
will
price
vote
of
yes.
admission.
B, I will vote no.
All right, Mrs. Brooks, will you read the next item, please?
I move to approve the early graduation applications as contained in the attachments to this agenda, contingent upon each applicant meeting his/her specified requirements in mathematics, science, English, social studies, health, and physical education, as well as the successful completion of their graduation project.
Second.
Is there any
Questions would be directed to Mr. Desko. It's an eclectic list of kids. 4, I think, was our total, correct?
5.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Desko?
Any thought to the disparity between north and south?
No, we see some fluctuations where there are more or fewer students from each of the high schools. These are initiated by students, so there's really no rhyme or reason other than students wanting to graduate early to get on with what they would like to see as their future plans.
I have had a conversation in text with Mr. Klein, because I'd be interested if there was some way to reach out and just find out how this has fared for the students who've used this option in the past 4 or 5 years, and just to understand how that's worked so that those children's experience to potentially help provide some guidance to the children who elect this option going forward. And I think Mr. Klein, Mr. Desko, you've agreed that's an idea you'll pursue.
It'd be interesting to know how they perceive it after a 3 or 4 year period away.
Any more thoughts? Hearing no objections, I'd ask the secretary to record the motion as passing with unanimous consent, please. Mr. Grupp, you could read the next one.
With pleasure. I move to award wheelchair accessible van bid 1448 to Roar School and Commercial Bus Sales at a total cost not to exceed $37,880, subject to audit.
Second.
Mr. Reinhardt, any modifications to the wheelchair van you'd like to add?
No, I think this is something we discussed at length.
So what you're saying is questions should be directed to Mr. Grupp?
I just want to take a moment to say that this was, I've been pushing for the past year to really bid items on their functionality, not on their name. And Jack Panero, our director of, our manager of the bus transportation, really took that to heart. He worked hard on this. The disparity in terms of pricing for these was quite great, and I think it was, what was the top one, 44,000? This one was 37, 39.
42 was the high, and this was 37.8.
Right. So I think it's really good that the process works, and I'm very pleased that we're going to be able to use this within the district, and particularly, Chuck, this is really for the Achieve program at this point, correct? Terrific.
Primarily, yes.
Terrific. So thank you for Chuck, and Rod for working on this.
I could also say we received a check this week for $10,000, a grant we received from Community Foundations Partnership. Am I getting that right, Mark?
Yes.
That was for the purpose of this purchase.
Oh, I didn't know.
Excellent, great.
Do we have to accept that?
Yes, but we just got it, so I couldn't get it to you, but we will get it before you.
Not that we have to accept it. I mean, we will accept
Yes,
it.
we must accept that on board policy, but it will come to you in another couple of weeks.
Any other comments, questions? Then, hearing no objections, I'd like the secretary to note the motion passed with unanimous consent, and I will move to number 4, Dr. Foster.
Mr. Block, could I interrupt you for one moment? I need to leave. I want to apologize ahead of time. I need to leave to go tend to a family matter.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 5? No, number 4.
Please.
I move to approve the purchase of 2015 GMC Savannah 9 passenger van from Penske GMC at a total cost not to exceed $27,738. Such price set by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's CoStarz contract, subject to audit.
Second.
This one could use a little context.
I'm sorry. Jack has been coming to me in regard to the replacement of the vehicle. Of the vehicles, there's 10 of them, and this is the next one to be replaced. So that's it.
Okay.
This is the same pricing as we got in the last one that we purchased for the Achieve program.
So this then, this
I'm
is
sorry,
not
I
for
was-
Achieve.
I'm trying to get back in, I'm sorry.
This is not for Achieve. This is just another van.
This is to replace a high mileage van.
So
Yes.
Achieve has one regular van and one accessible van now.
Yes.
And this is not
No,
another
this is
accessible.
just to replace the normal replacement. The van that is going to be replaced is going to be going to the maintenance department for their use.
Okay, thanks.
Questions? All right, hearing no objections, ask the secretary to record the motion of passing with unanimous consent. And we'll move to number 5, Mr. Abramson, please.
I move to approve the Council Rock Board of School Directors Policy Committee Charter as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
At the last board meeting, you asked us to come back to you with a charter for policy committee. Nothing fancy or glitzy about it, just the basic charter. I look forward to working, as does Ms. Trioli, who will chair with me, with Dr. Foster, to put this together and set out a path and a set of dates so we can start moving forward.
I want to point out the one difference in this charter from the other charters. A few years ago, we had amended the other charters to allow as many board members to attend as they wanted, which required the meetings to be publicly advertised.
Sorry, I thought I'd struck that too. You're absolutely correct.
So,
We'll strike that line.
do we want to, I'm sorry, my whole question was, before you strike it, the question I have is, did we want to keep this not, so that we could have it as more of an impromptu thing, and work, while we are still welcome to advertise it, we are not obligated to advertise it?
That's a good point.
Because oftentimes working through these things, it's like watching paint dry.
I find it fascinating.
You can come paint my house. So do we want to leave it, let me ask the board, do you want to leave it as, so it can be run more in camera, or do you want to have it that it must be advertised?
Well, here's just, if I'm going to chair this thing, I wanted to tell you what I had in mind so we can see whether we're synced up or not. So, the reality is, for this year, the first half of the year, not only do we have the budget, but we need to hire a superintendent. We have contract negotiations, and we have capital planning, some pretty heavy lifting. So the reality is, I don't foresee us having a lot of activity the first half of the year. And so what I wanted to suggest is that those of us who have policies that we want to review, whether because they have errors in them, they're old, they're important, but they're misaligned with whatever, send those suggestions in to me, and I'll compile them. And then the thought is, in August, I'll send out to everyone, and also the public is welcome, to Mr. Roche's point, to send their ideas in. I'll compile a list and what the policy is, what the issue is of concern, whether it's just a minor deletion or what have you, or if it's a new policy of interest. And then the first meeting of September, the public meeting, I would like to just say, what did we get? And in the remaining part of the year, 2 items of work. One, a more consent agenda type item that lists policies that are just being a minor revision where we don't really need to discuss it. It'll be listed there what the proposed revision is. If people want to discuss it, it'll come off that list. Otherwise, they'll just go through as a mass revision. And then the other, it'll have to be a handful, because it is like watching paint dry, important policies that we really want to dig into. And those we would try to finish up by the end of the year. So given the body of work we have, that's what I would propose we do. So no meetings for the first half of the year. So in that respect, this language would be fine, because I'm not envisioning a whole bunch of public meetings or standing meetings. So that's what I'm thinking.
Any other comments?
Unlike the other committees, this one has memberships for the policy committee.
I don't know why we just don't take that part out. If we have a meeting, then people, I mean, if I understand you, Dr. Foster, you're not really planning on attacking any of this other than gathering email information and kind of compiling it into.
At least for this year, given all that we have.
Although I would wonder, I think there's a few policies, and Mr. Klein would know better than me because I'm not an expert on policies.
There are a few.
That are coming up this spring. So maybe I agree with you. There's a lot of heavy work to be done. Maybe there'd be one meeting or whatever. I don't know. You could say, but I just prefer that it was open. If we decide we need a meeting this spring, we'll advertise it. Like, what? I don't
that's
see the
fine.
harm. Do you mind?
But that can supersede this. We can always advertise a meeting, and then,
Well, it says no more than 4 members, and I
well,
guess that
but
would,
if it's
that's
an
what would be
if
my
it's a
concern.
publicly advertised meeting, it's
Yeah, that's
not-
true, then anybody can do it.
Right, but it's 4 members if you're having an unadvertised meeting,
That,
then you're,
that's the law, we know that, so, you know, regardless of what it says here, if we have a publicly advertised meeting.
Everybody
it's-
can come anyway.
Right.
Taken the other way, if you have only 4 people want to get together and talk about it, you don't have to advertise. Even if you
Yeah.
have an
Yeah.
official committee that meets on a schedule, if 4 people want to get together and do something.
If something comes up and we decide.
so back to the point,
So you got to take it out?
are there memberships or by the board or not?
Why don't you leave it to interest?
Yeah, I mean,
The first 4 people or first other 3 people that come to him?
Well, I'd ask Billy, you know, if you're chairing it, then would you feel more
Well,
comfortable if you
I
have
mean,
4
what I've
people?
already said is, from my perspective, what we're talking about is not gonna happen, because I want it to, I don't foresee a need for meetings the first half of the year, and I'd rather just attack some of these things in our full board meeting.
And then when you do have policy meetings, are you going to want a core group of people that you can count on to be there?
I'm happy to advertise it, because it's gonna be, but going into that meeting, it's gonna say what exactly the meeting's about, and those who are interested, any or all of us can come, so regardless of what it says here, I'd rather it be advertised to be a public meeting if we're gonna have a meeting.
I mean,
So Mark, strike the maximum.
So just
And it
go
can
ahead and
still
strike
meet-
it as part of the motion, and then we'll.
Right,
take
and it can
charge.
still meet sub-quorum. So who made the motion?
that was,
You'll agree to strike the membership shall be limited to 4 board members?
If that's the will of the board, yes.
Well, I seconded it, so I'll agree to that.
we're gonna strike membership shall be limited to a maximum of 4 board members
Okay.
under leadership and membership. Is there any other comment? The only thing I would say is, I appreciate the approach. I know there's a lot to do. I guess I would challenge us to, as a group, to share our thoughts about what policies might be important to take a look at with you sooner rather than later.
I agree.
In the case that if something does bubble up that we identify as important, it doesn't preclude us from waiting till
Right.
August to get on it.
Yeah. So if there, for instance, are, if items come through sooner rather than later, if, for instance, tonight's meeting is actually a pretty light agenda, if by some miracle there are meetings with light agendas the first half of the year, we can grab some of that space.
I like your format a lot, and there are certain policies, just by law, we're supposed to revisit our child abuse policy, where we could put them in consent, just say they're either going to be looked at or they're minor revisions. I think that makes a lot of sense, rather than kind of formally throw them out as the first read, second read. And then those revisions that need language work, will go back through our normal process.
I don't disagree. I think the one thing that happens, though, is there needs to be some plan, maybe a policy revision, to review the policies on a regular basis.
I agree with that.
Because what happens is we are so backlogged now with policies that have not been reviewed since '98 that who knows if they're valid or not. That
Well,
we have to get over that
You know,
hurdle.
you mentioned 1998. There's a couple of policies on HIV that are from 1998, and they clearly represent the kind of panic and fear of HIV that has completely changed. Most of the modern treatments came out after 1998. So I don't know that some of the language there, it may all be lawful, but is it really needed anymore?
Well, welcome to the beeper policy. There is still in the state of Pennsylvania a prohibition against people under 18 years of age having a beeper.
But for those kind of things, I would rather just identify them, and if we all agree, they can be hidden in the consent, and they'll just go.
Okay. Any other comment here? We'll take a quick roll call vote.
Mr. Grupp?
Yes.
Mrs., oh, she's got it, okay. Mrs. Sexton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Abramson?
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
And Dr. Foster?
Yes.
I guess I can now formally appoint you chair of the committee.
There you go.
Ms. Thomas, could you read the last?
Yes, happily. I move to approve the purchase of 30 iPads and iPad Power Sync cart at the total cost of $14,019.95, subject to audit. The Churchville Elementary School Parent Teacher Organization will donate $14,000 towards the purchase price.
Have a second?
Second.
So it will cost us $19.95.
You got a good string
Thank
here,
them
maybe.
very much.
Maybe we'll get one of these every week.
That's a lot of work.
Fantastic.
Very good. Thank you, Churchville.
Yes, thank you. And hearing no objections, I would ask Terry to record the motion as passing with unanimous consent. Mr. Cox, anything from the solicitor?
Just that there was an executive session before the meeting on personnel, one particular student issue, and a matter involving a potential claim against the district. That's all I have, Mr. Block.
Thank you. We'll move to board items. We've split this into old business and new business. One topic under old business was the calendar discussion we had last week at our meeting. In the agenda, our calendar for next year has been laid out. I will, as discussed, be working with the individual chairs of each of the committees, as well as Mr. Klein, to identify the big meaningful items that fall into some of those meetings. You'll note that we added a meeting on the 17th to ensure that we're able to coordinate the work that we've got to do, and more importantly, if there's opportunities to move committee meetings around to get better attendance, we'll be able to do that. I think Dr. Foster, that'll also help us understand where there's opportunities to move policy in there.
Okay.
So that was all the old business. Is there any new business?
There's two other items of old business.
One of them I was going to mention was about the video archiving. Do you want to
Right,
mention that?
so there were two items of old business. One, we talked last time, as well as the policy of having a technology charter. I'm not sure if we're going to do that or not. I was reconsidering that. And someone reminded me that many years ago we actually had a technology advisory committee, which was more of a meeting where people were made aware of what was going on in the district. Back with Toby in room 225 East or something like that, or 125 East. So Mark, maybe that would be a different route to go, which is, we spend a lot on technology and we want to keep people informed. So I think there needs to be some focus on technology, whether it's as an advisory committee or whether a policy committee. So that, we had asked for that last time, that didn't come back. That was actually an emotion to come back.
In February, the academic standards agenda item is around technology. Do we want to perhaps move that into the board meeting and broaden the conversation about that? I don't know what the agenda would look like.
I'm not sure how the topic's going to be handled yet. That's kind of the question.
Well, I'm sure it's being framed, but we can put it under an umbrella topic of technology. It could be the theme of the night.
So,
Denise, you're talking about technology in the classroom?
Yeah, but I mean, we could frame it in a broader sense. I mean, obviously Matt is working on something for that. We can have multiple topics.
well, my point was it's sort of an ongoing concern for a budget the size of the budget this item has, not to...
I understand that.
So-
We can formalize that conversation.
Why don't we
Just suggesting,
take a look at what they were thinking, see what the administration is thinking. We pull that forward in that time frame.
Yeah, with my apologies, I didn't recognize from the last board meeting that we were supposed to come back tonight with a charter. I thought that conversation about whether the technology committee was going to be formed was still an ongoing one. Matt and I have done a draft of what that might look like, that charter and those responsibilities. But again...
And whether you want to frame it as a board committee or an
as a
advisory
standing
committee.
Right.
It's-
So let us bring you back on the 8th, maybe a draft of what that might look like, and Matt and I will spend some time on it in the next couple of weeks.
Terrific. The second item at old business was, last week at the public comment, there was requests or commentary about our placement of the board videos on YouTube. We've moved the board videos to YouTube back in April, I think it was, of last year, around about April. And we did that in part because it gives much better performance. And if you look at the board meeting most recently, you'll note that Matt has had someone now index when the different items start. And you can actually, if you look at the board, at the video underneath, and you do show more, it'll show you the different topics that we covered. If you click on one, you'll jump to that point in the discussion. So that's been done. That was kind of a proof of concept last time because someone had to attend to it and watch it. As we've been holding this meeting, Matt has had the people who are recording the meeting downstairs note when the agenda items start, so the indexing of it will be easier. So going forward, we did the proof of concept. We'll now do an initial trial to see how it rolls out. To the public, if you want to catch an item in this meeting, you should be able to come into it when it's posted and choose the item off the list under the video and get right to that discussion point. Those are my two topics of old business.
Is there any new business?
I just wanted to say one thing. So a speaker tonight in public comment mentioned the great job that Kapo's doing, and I just wanted to publicly thank her. I know it's not like new business, but board comments, whatever this is, I just wanted to thank you. You've been doing a great job, and as Donna has when she has been here in your absence. But thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
So, oh, go ahead.
On old business, on the calendar, so the meetings with Mr. Galasso, are they on here yet or not?
No.
If I could, this is just a format. If you like it, let me know and we'll start adding to it. We tried to put it on the board calendar, on the board docs. That didn't necessarily get everybody in here. We can try to do this. We can send out meeting notes. Some people get those invitations, some people don't. So I'm just, this was Marie and I's opportunity to show you something that was at least a little bit more visual.
No, I like that. Yeah,
And we can, what we would do is just keep adding to it as you give us new dates, and that will just I'll republish it once a week if I can.
And then we'll
There was a lot of information in the dates with Dr. Galasso and things, so I was actually going to refine it and put it out in smaller pieces because I got one board member said I can make all of them and not any comments from anybody else, so I don't know if everybody can make them or not, but I think it might be a little easier to say, okay, here's what's January, is everybody good? Because if people aren't good, then by the time I go back and forth with, and Dr. Galasso just, I feel like Jerry, for the viewing public, is helping us with the superintendent search. So I'm going to try to put some of that out this weekend. I just didn't get to it yet. And then get yes or no so we're confirmed. And then I'll give them to everybody for this calendar for permanent. You know, yes, we can all, or most of us can make this seat. It'll go on there.
And then we'll find a way
Is
to...
that all right?
Yeah, that's good.
And then within the calendar, we'll try to find a way to identify major topics within that so we can kind of see what's coming. Ms. Sexton, you have a comment?
So when we went to the meeting at Wrightstown the other night, a member of the public talked to me about the state legislature has passed a new law or program for us in terms of clearances. I don't know, federal reporting and state reporting and local reporting, I don't know. But when we have the moms come into school to work with the Home and School Association, does that law say they have to have all those clearances? Or is there, so if you don't know right now.
It probably does. It depends upon what specific tasks they perform. But there's some leeway for current volunteers.
So we have addressed.
Volunteers who currently volunteer for school districts have to have their background check and child abuse clearances in place by, I believe, July 1, 2015. New volunteers, Ms. Trioli is going to correct me if I'm wrong, new volunteers who aren't currently volunteering with the district can't volunteer for the district as of January 1st, 2015, unless they have their clearances in place.
So we need to know, the home and school parents who spoke with me said, this will cost us, she mentioned a number of $48.
It's $48 per person.
Per person, and that will include all the clearances?
Yes.
Because I know I did it just recently for employment, and it was well over $100.
It's $48 per person.
Ms. Trioli, just to comment on it, because we've spent a lot of time on it, and she's, I think, our resident expert on what this is and how how we're trying to cut the equity between the person who wants to show up one afternoon to help and the person who's there on an ongoing basis.
We've had ongoing discussions throughout all of last school year to define who has regular contact with children, because the legislation reads that our volunteers and contractors need the clearances if they are in direct supervision of students, if they have regular contact. So we met frequently as a team and decided together that our threshold would be if a volunteer is in the building one or more times per week, that would meet that threshold of regular and daily interaction with children. So we began, principals furnished the Human Resources Office with a list of volunteers who meet that threshold, and we've begun the process of asking for the clearances this year, because we had no clearances on any of the volunteers prior to the outreach. So my office has been working with PTO presidents, moms, those that are frequently in our schools that meet that threshold so that we can get this process started. Like Rob said, it becomes required on July of 2015, so we're not stopping anybody from volunteering. People are out volunteering actively, but we're putting this requirement in front of them, explaining what needs to be done and trying to support them through the process.
How long is it good?
Good for 3 years.
And I feel silly asking this, you know, when you do employment, you often run background checks on people. But it's always interesting, because when you run the background check, what's the measure that would prohibit you from hiring somebody? So when you run, or someone's background check is run in this regard, do they get a no-go, as a red light, green light, or?
Well, there are a number of offenses that preclude you from working in a public school setting, and I can share those with you. They're outlined very clearly. And then there are those offenses where we need to take a closer look, and we'll work with Eastburn and Gray, Mr. Klein and myself. So it's not a clear-cut answer. There are some that absolutely preclude you from being in our schools, and there are others where the length of time that has elapsed since the offense, the nature of the offense.
And not to, and I don't want to go into great detail here, but we're a public school, and it's we run up against this item, which is parents are parents. There's no test to decide whether you have children or not, and then we're obligated to educate those children. So we could be up against something where the parent of a child in the school is prohibited from participating in the child's education.
I think that there's a distinction. There's going to be a distinction, probably, hopefully clarified by PDE, between a volunteer and a visitor. So that whereas the law requires background check and clearance for volunteers, a regular school visitor, a mom or a dad coming in to see their child in the school play or read to their child's classroom on a one-off situation, wouldn't have to go through that onerous set of background requirements. And I anticipate, I'm hopeful, as all of my colleagues are, that PDE will clarify those rules in the weeks ahead. Is that your understanding?
I'm not thinking of any specific case. It's just it's an interesting conundrum of the two colliding.
So, Mrs. Sexton, I think it's a great point. We're going to address the entire Parent Advisory Committee at the end of January about where we think the thresholds are. We have very little, we're going to try to figure out where that line is, but the legislation is fairly clear, and there are penalties for school districts if they do not follow. The interesting conundrum, as you point out, is what precludes you from working kids and what doesn't. They don't tell you if you get a state police clearance that says you had a DUI 10 years ago, what that does and doesn't do. Those will be things we have to work in. But it's a part of a 23 pieces of legislation that came down, all refining the Child Protective Services Act, and this is just one small sliver of a large array of new things we have to do that are destined to be expensive for the school district and onerous for people who are coming in, but all designed to help protect kids.
The mother that spoke to me, her biggest concern was that for some families, $48, in order to come in and be a part of this activity, it'll cost you, first of all, you have to think about it long before the activity actually happens. but $50 maybe can be spent on something else. Not that I don't think everybody that swipes their license is being checked for
Exactly.
child
That's
abuse
one of the major
already.
proofs we
So
have.
it's a little bit redundant.
But by the description of coming in once a week, the majority of parents aren't going to need this. I mean, this wouldn't cover like you're coming in to set up for the father-daughter dance because
Right,
you're not
we-
even with the kids.
We think that's the right way. And by the way, for Ms. Trioli, I just want to refine what Ms. Trioli said. We do have ongoing volunteers that get the state police clearance. Every SAGE member gets a state police clearance, and every member of the, I want to call them the dog team, but the folks that come in with the canine groups, what are they called? The therapy dogs. Those folks all get those. So because we know that they are ongoing in our schools and they are working individually with kids.
Right, but for the majority of how
Yeah.
these PTOs function, I would think very, very few parents actually need this clearance.
We are waiting, however, for the state to give us that kind of direction.
I guess
And
this
in the
is one
interim,
of
we're going to do the best we can.
This is one of the policies that will have to be done before August. We have
Yes.
policies on,
Well, and that's the interesting thing is the PSBA policy legislative piece hasn't even given us a model policy yet. So they're still debating or waiting for clarification too. So stay tuned. It's a great question. We'll keep working with it and we'll keep relying on our colleagues in other school districts to help us refine this.
And Mrs. Brooks
Sorry.
is accurate. The list that we've gotten from the schools are relatively small of those that meet the threshold. So that's an accurate assessment.
Because I was at the Richboro Elementary PTO meeting today, this week, and there was a lot of anxiety about this because there was a perception that like everyone that was at this meeting would need this. There was also the notion that it had to be renewed every year, and it was also quoted as $100 or more. So there is definitely some.
Could you explain why there's a differential in understanding that, what the clearances are? I thought so too. I thought they were over $100, but what they require is not what right now we have to implement. Would you explain that?
There is definitely some confusion. So you have the PA criminal record, which is, I believe, 10, and then the child abuse is 15, and then the FBI clearance is escaping me at the moment. I believe that one is 40. I have to take a look. So it's definitely not at $100. The legislation reads now, and Mr. Cox can verify this, that it says you do the child abuse and the FBI. It does not say that you need to do, the PA criminal history and the FBI, not the child abuse. My colleagues and I met last Friday, all the HR directors in the area, and thought that perhaps that was a typo, and that it was probably wise to ask volunteers and our contractors to do all three. All of our contractors now do all three. So I know I'm waiting on some further guidance from our IU partners at the IU, because they've asked that question: is it a typo? Do we need to do the child abuse as well? So if it's not a typo, it could be even more reasonable. It's all very new, so we're really working closely. We're staying together, trying to make sure that as a county, we're doing the same things too.
So there'll be more information later.
We are trying, and we need the state to keep giving us their clarifications too. So between now and July, I'm certain we will have far more clarification on this than we have it now. But I absolutely recognize it's not our making, but it will have a significant chilling effect on volunteerism if that state definition exceeds or expands what we think it is right now too. So we'll have to wait and understand that.
Any more new business? Okay, we'll move to our second round of public comment. More public comment?
Sorry.
Cartwheel time?
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. I have to correct the historical record. It's the 1993-94 booklet. And
I know why you kept that.
And Mr. Murphy, that second grade class was up at Goodnow because there wasn't enough room here. It was the first year that, in 1986, this was K to 3. And by 1993-94, there wasn't enough room because there were so many second grade sections. They had to move them up to Goodnow. There was 44 sections total in the school, 72 teachers. And a lot of them, like we had 2 music, 2 art. We had a full-time psychologist,
but things were a lot simpler back then. Volunteers didn't have to get background checks. We didn't have to worry about technology. Goodnow was the first school in the district to have a dedicated computer room when it opened up its addition in 1989. And about the technology, Churchville, when they donated their money for computers tonight, it all went to the devices. Or Salt Finestone, when they dedicated their money, they had to pay, I think it was $9,000 to get the right connectivity. So there is a big problem about technology in this district. When some schools have to pay, not only donate the computers, but pay for the connectivity. And we have 2 elementary schools that have recently been renovated, so they can just pay for the devices. And I wanted to point that out, and I want everyone to be aware of that. I tried to see if there were different start times. I looked through the handbook while I was sitting there, and I don't know, but I know that busing was not a problem. And it was totally integrated school. You know, at that time, it was called Chancellor Goodnow. I wish the Wrightstown people luck, and no matter what happens, I'm sure that their children will receive an excellent education, no matter where they're sitting. Even though I didn't want this school to close, when it finally did close, the students went up with their teachers. They actually were in a better facility because it was newer, and everybody was okay. And I have confidence that that will happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Good evening again. John Mershey, Wrightstown Township. In terms of the thoughts going forward about the number of schools we need and so on and so forth, and what's going to be closed and what's not going to be, I do understand that there are a lot of parents who feel that they and the children are the constituency that you have. They are not your entire constituency. All the taxpayers, all the residents of this school district are your constituency. Doing things that may cause some parents grief does not mean you are turning your back on your constituency. If it's in the best interest of the district as a whole, of the people who are paying the bills, which includes the parents, but also includes many people who do not have children in the schools, you are still serving your constituency. To cite some statement that you will stand behind every school as a rationale for never closing any school is a false statement. You should stand behind every school that is necessary. The board was aware in 2007 that over the course of the coming years, enrollment was going to decline significantly. At that time, I spoke here and asked why the issue of closing schools was not even being talked about. I was told offline that the board did not want to frighten the community with talk about redistricting or school closures. So as a result, you have a whole bunch of people here who act as if this is a new issue, act as if this is the first board that ought to be doing something about it. Of course the other boards should have been doing something about it, but by remaining silent that long, they kept the constituency thinking that the status quo could go on and on and on forever. I would encourage the board to start framing discussions saying if something isn't done about right-sizing the number of facilities we have, and therefore the number of administrators we have, the number of other ancillary things we have, this district is sooner or later going to have a choice between do we pay for the electric and the plumbing at Wrightstown, or do we start cutting music someplace? Because there's not going to be enough money for everything. It isn't as if this is a pot of money that can keep growing. And thanks to Act 1, the board no longer has the ability to solely say on their own, we're going to raise taxes by whatever we choose to raise them to keep funding everything that we do. I think the time for asking these parents to start looking at the health of the entire district and not simply their own school has come. And I encourage the board to be clearer and to start drawing that distinction, that for every dollar that's going for a school that really isn't necessary anymore, that's money that could be used for programs. That's money that could be used for students, and it's not. It's also more money out of every parent's pocket and out of the pocket of every taxpayer who's not a parent. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further board comment? Well, that being said, I just want to take 2 seconds to thank Mr. Klein, the administration here for a wonderful year, all of our staff out in TV land. This place is great because of what y'all do. So thank you. Happy holidays to everybody, and Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2015. I love this thing.